The cameras never lied. That was what Corporal Marcus Webb told himself every time he looked through the viewfinder, every time he clicked the shutter. Truth in pixels. Reality frozen at 1,000th of a second. He'd been stationed at Firebase Kepler for 8 months documenting coalition operations on Proxima Centauri B. The work was straightforward. Promotional shots of human soldiers, standing tall against alien skies, equipment photos for maintenance manuals, the occasional memorial portrait when someone didn't make it home. Clean work. Safe work. The kind of deployment that let you forget you were 3 light years from Earth. Lieutenant Sarah Chen was his usual subject. She had the kind of face the recruitment posters loved. Sharp angles, determined eyes, a scar along her jawline that spoke of close calls survived. Today's shoot was routine environmental portraiture in the crystalline forest north of the base. The alien trees grew in geometric patterns that photographers called God's own backdrop. Webb checked his light meter and frowned. The readings were fluctuating, the ambient levels dropping without reason. Chen noticed it too. Her hand drifted toward her sidearm, fingers drumming against the holster in a rhythm Webb recognized. She'd done 3 tours before this one. She knew when something was wrong. "We should wrap this up," Chen said. Her voice had that forced casualness people used when they didn't want to admit they were spooked. Webb nodded and fired off a final burst, 6 frames. The camera's mechanical whir felt too loud in the sudden stillness. Even the wind had stopped. He pulled the camera from his eye and saw Chen staring past him, her face gone pale. "Did you feel that?" he had. A pressure behind his eyes like someone watching through a distorted lens. The hairs on his arms stood up. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. Time felt viscous, each second stretching. They made it back to the transport in silence. Webb's hand shook as he loaded the equipment. Chen drove without speaking, checking the rearview mirror every few seconds. Neither mentioned what they'd felt. Talking about it would make it real. The base's darkroom was a converted supply closet that reeked of fixer solution and recycled air. Webb worked in the red safe light, developing the day's film by muscle memory. He'd done this thousands of times. Load the reel, mix the chemicals, agitate, rinse, hang to dry. Meditation through chemistry, he almost missed it. The negatives hung like prayer flags above the processing sink. Webb scanned them with a loupe, checking focus and exposure, when his eye caught something in frame 4. A distortion at the edge. Where the trees met darkness, he switched to higher magnification. 3 figures, humanoid in shape but wrong in proportion. Their limbs bent at angles that violated human anatomy, the faces. If they were faces, looked like they were being viewed through a fisheye lens, features compressed and bulging. But the forest around them was sharp, perfectly in focus. They'd been invisible in the viewfinder. They showed up in the photograph. Webb's first instinct was to report it through channels. His second instinct, the one that kept people alive, told him to find someone outside the chain of command. Someone who'd ask questions instead of confiscating evidence. He found Thomas Park in the base cantina, hunched over a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Park wrote for the Coalition Tribune, one of the few independent outlets that hadn't been absorbed by military public affairs. He had the permanent squint of someone who'd spent years staring at screens in bad lighting. Webb slid a contact sheet across the table. Park glanced at it, then looked again. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. "Where did you take this?" 3 clicks north, this afternoon. Park's eyes moved between the images and Webb's face, calculating odds, weighing risks. "You show this to anyone else?" "Just you. Keep it that way." Park pocketed the contact sheet. "I need to verify something. Meet me at 0200. Loading Bay 7. Webb spent the next 6 hours trying to sleep and failing. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those figures in the negative, their distorted faces staring back through 4 billion miles and a chemical emulsion. At 1:45, he gave up, dressed, and made his way through the darkened base. Park was already there, pacing in small circles. He looked worse than before, eyes red-rimmed, jaw clenched. He thrust a datapad at Webb without preamble. "Read." The files were classified but not encrypted, as if someone wanted them found. Reports dating back 18 months. Unauthorized presence detected. Personnel missing. Witnesses reporting temporal distortions and memory gaps. Every incident investigated and closed with the same conclusion. Equipment malfunction, environmental factors, no evidence of hostile contact. "The erasers have been scrubbing this from day one," Park said. The word came out bitter. "Black-budget spooks. They work outside the regular military structure. Their whole job is making inconvenient truths disappear. Why cover it up? Because the coalition sold this colony on safety. 300,000 civilians here based on promises that Proxima B was secure. If it gets out that some's been abducting people and the brass knew about it, Park shook his head. They'd rather bury the evidence than risk the panic. A sound echoed through the loading bay. Footsteps. Multiple sets, moving with purpose. Park grabbed Webb's arm and pulled him behind a stack of supply crates. Two figures emerged from the shadows, a man and woman in unmarked black fatigues. No rank insignia, no unit patches. The woman carried herself with the easy confidence of someone used to people getting out of her way. The man was taller, his face expressionless as carved stone. "Corporal Webb," the woman called out. Her voice bounced off the metal walls. "We know you're here. We just want to talk about the photographs." Park's fingers dug into Webb's forearm. "Don't," his eyes said. Webb stayed quiet. The woman sighed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. The images you developed are classified material under Colonial Security Directive 7. Surrender them and this conversation never happened." Webb felt Park shift beside him, reaching for something in his jacket. A recorder. He was documenting this. Mad bastard. "We have protocols for this," the man said. His voice was flat, bureaucratic. "Cooperation is strongly encouraged." "And if I don't cooperate?" Webb called back, surprising himself. The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Then we invoke Directive 7, Section C. Everything related to the incident gets sequestered, including witnesses." The lights died. Not gradually. One moment fluorescent brightness, the next absolute darkness. Webb's eyes couldn't adjust because there was nothing to adjust to. The darkness was total, oppressive. Then he heard it. A sound like a swarm of mechanical insects, high-pitched and drilling into his skull. The eraser's flashlight snapped on, beam cutting through the dark. They were frozen in place, their faces slack with surprise. Between them, visible only as a distortion in the flashlight beams, something moved. The air rippled like heat shimmer. The woman's flashlight fell from her hand. It rolled across the floor, its beam spinning crazy shadows until it stopped at Webb's feet, illuminating what stood before the erasers. They were exactly like the figures in the photograph, humanoid but distorted, their proportions subtly wrong. One of them raised an appendage that might have been a hand. The negatives Webb had hidden in his jacket pocket grew hot against his chest, then cold, then were simply gone. He felt them vanish, matter ceasing to exist. The entities withdrew, backing into shadows that shouldn't have been deep enough to hide them. The lights flickered back on. The erasers stood motionless for 3 seconds, then blinked in unison and looked around as if waking from sleep. "Where's Webb?" the woman asked. "Who?" The man's confusion seemed genuine. "They left." Webb and Park waited 10 minutes in silence before moving. "They forgot," Park whispered. "It made them forget." Webb's jacket pocket was empty. The negatives were gone, but his camera was still in his quarters, with the original digital files. The creatures, or whatever they were, had taken the physical evidence but missed the source. That was their first mistake. Over the next week, Webb and Park worked in careful isolation. Webb made copies of the digital files, fragmenting them across different storage media and hiding them throughout the base. Park reached out to his network of journalists and researchers, building a distributed web of information that couldn't be disappeared by any single action. They found an ally in Dr. Yuki Sato, the base's xenobiologist. She'd been collecting her own evidence. Tissue samples that appeared and vanished, cellular structures that violated known physics, energy readings that spiked during reported disappearances. She'd kept it all off the official network, recording observations in paper notebooks she kept in a locked safe lock. "They're studying us," Sato said during their third meeting. "Every abduction, every encounter, they're gathering data. But they're sloppy, they leave gaps. The erasers are just cleaning up after them." "Sloppy how?" Webb asked. Sato pulled out a hand-drawn diagram. "They can manipulate perception, make themselves invisible to the human eye. But cameras see in wavelengths they don't account for. They can erase physical evidence, but not memories, not completely. People remember fragments. Enough fragments, and you can reconstruct the truth." "So we reconstruct it," Park said. "We find everyone who's had an encounter. We compile everything they can remember. We make the pattern too big to erase." It took 6 days. 6 days of careful interviews and clandestine meetings. Webb photographed everything, building an archive that documented not just the entities but the cover-up itself. Park wrote the story in fragments, each section stored separately, ready to be compiled and published the moment it went live. They found 12 people who'd encountered the entities. A maintenance worker who'd lost 2 hours and woke up with unexplained marks. A pilot whose nav systems had failed during an entity sighting. A botanist who documented equipment malfunctions and temporal distortions identical to Webb's experience. The pattern was clear. The entities operated on a schedule, appearing every 47 hours in different locations. They were predictable. Predictable meant vulnerable. Chen volunteered to be bait. I was there during the first encounter, she said. Maybe they're tracking me, we use that. They set up in the same forest clearing where Webb had taken the original photographs. This time he brought 3 cameras, each set to different wavelengths. Sato monitored energy readings. Park recorded everything. The entities arrived exactly 47 hours after the last sighting. They materialized at the edge of the clearing, 3 of them, their distorted forms rippling into visibility. Webb forced himself to keep shooting, frame after frame. The cameras captured them in detail. The segmented limbs, the oval heads with too many eyes, the way their bodies seemed to exist slightly out of phase with normal space. One of them approached Chen. She held her ground, hands at her sides, every muscle tense but controlled. Webb knew what she was doing. She was counting heartbeats, the way she'd been trained, giving herself something to focus on besides the fear. The entity stopped 3 meters away. It raised one limb and Webb saw something in its appendage. A device, crystalline, glowing with internal light. The same light he'd seen in Lieutenant Park's missing time accounts. Chen pulled the trigger, not on the entity, on the signal flare in her other hand. The one they'd modified with Sato's help, tuned to emit a frequency that made the entity's cloaking unstable. The forest lit up. Not with 3 entities, but with dozens. They'd been there all along, invisible, watching. The flare's light made them flicker in and out of existence, their forms stuttering like a corrupted video file. And then the erasers arrived. 4 vehicles screaming into the clearing, disgorging agents in tactical gear. The woman from the loading bay led them, her face hard with purpose. She raised a hand shouting commands Webb couldn't hear over the engine noise. The entities began to retreat, but Chen wasn't done. She'd brought something else from the armory. An arc flare, designed for clearing landing zones. It put out enough an electromagnetic noise to blind sensors for 300 meters. She triggered it. The clearing became day-bright. Every shadow burned away. The entity's forms solidified, their cloaking completely failing, and Webb's cameras caught it all. The Ursace realized what was happening a second too late. They lunged for the cameras, but Park had already transmitted the files. They were uploading to his network, dispersing across 100 different servers, beyond reach of any single purge. The woman grabbed Park by the collar. You just ended your career. No, Park said quietly. I just saved it. Chen fired a second arc flare. The entities retreated fully, disappearing into whatever space they occupied when invisible. But the damage was done, the evidence was out. The truth was recorded in wavelengths that couldn't be erased, distributed across a network that couldn't be silenced. The woman released Park, her expression shifting from anger to something else. Resignation. She pulled out a comm unit and spoke quietly into it. Webb caught fragments, situation containment impossible, and full disclosure protocols. She ended the call and looked at the 3 of them. You have no idea what you've done. We've done what you should have done from the start, Sato said. Told the truth. The truth is complicated. The entities aren't hostile, they're researchers. We've been working with them. Controlled contact, managed disclosure. But you've just blown it wide open. Working with them, Chen repeated, while they abduct our people. In exchange for technology you can't imagine. Faster than light communication. Medical advances that could save millions. But it required secrecy. The terms of contact stipulated. I don't care about the terms, Webb interrupted. You don't get to trade people's lives and memories for technology. That's not your decision to make. The woman studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. No, I suppose it's not. She turned and walked back to her vehicle. The other erasers followed. The engine started, and the convoy pulled away, leaving the 3 of them standing in the clearing as the arc flare burned itself out. Park's comm unit buzzed. He checked it and smiled, the first genuine smile Webb had seen from him in days. The story just went live. Every major outlet in coalition space is picking it up. Within hours, the military issued a statement. Limited contact with non-hostile entities. Research exchange program. Regrettable instances of miscommunication. The phrases were carefully chosen, admitting nothing while confirming everything. Within days, the questions started. Public hearings. Demands for oversight. The coalition couldn't put the truth back in the box. 3 months later, Webb found himself in front of a colonial ethics committee, testifying about what he'd photographed. Chen sat beside him, describing the entities in clinical detail. Park had won 2 journalism awards and used the platform to push for transparency laws. The entities still visited, still conducted their research, but now they did it in the open, with human observers present under protocols that both sides had agreed to. The abductions stopped. The memory alterations ended. The erasers were reassigned to actual security work. Webb kept photographing. He'd learned something important in that forest. The camera never lied, but organizations did. Governments did. Sometimes the truth needed to be captured in silver halide and pixels, made permanent and undeniable. He'd done that. They all had. The entities remained mostly a mystery. Their motives, their origins, their ultimate goals, all unknown. But they were no longer invisible, and humans, stubborn and curious and unwilling to accept easy answers, would keep watching, keep questioning, keep documenting. Because that's what humans did when faced with the unknown. They pointed a camera at it, clicked the shutter, and refused to look away. They told the truth even when powerful people wanted silence. They stood their ground even when the easy choice was to run. The cameras never lied, and neither, Webb had learned, did humans who refused to be erased.